I never thought I'd end up living like some kind of cliff-dwelling bat, suspended between earth and sky with nothing but rope and salvaged metal between me and a 100-foot drop. But here I am, day 47 since I hammered the last support beam into the rock face, and I'm still breathing. That counts for something. The infection started in the cities. Everyone knows that part. What they don't tell you in those final emergency broadcasts, the ones that looped until the stations went dark, is how fast it moved once it hit the rural areas. No traffic jams to slow it down out here. No concrete barriers. Just open roads and small towns with populations that couldn't mount any real defense. I was living in Millbrook then, population 2,300, working at Henderson's hardware store, and spending my weekends hiking the canyon systems that spiderwebbed through the backcountry. The first case showed up on a Tuesday. Old Trevor Hutchins came stumbling into Doc Morrison's clinic with what everyone assumed was a bad case of rabies. He'd been bitten by something, he said, couldn't remember what. By Wednesday evening, Trevor had attacked 2 nurses and Doc Morrison himself. By Thursday, Millbrook didn't exist anymore as anything resembling a functioning town. I was on the early shift at Henderson's when Gary Cole, the sheriff's deputy, came running in screaming about how we needed to lock the doors, how something was wrong with people, how we needed weapons. Gary had his service pistol drawn, and I'd never seen his hands shake like that before. He was a veteran, did 2 tours overseas, and I'd never seen him scared of anything. We didn't lock the doors fast enough. Mrs. Patterson came through the front entrance, and I'd known her my entire life. She used to give me butterscotch candies when I was a kid, always had a kind word, always asked about my mother. She came through those doors with her floral dress torn and covered in blood that wasn't hers. And her eyes were wrong. Not just the redness or the burst vessels, but the way they didn't focus on anything, the way they looked through you instead of at you. Gary put 3 rounds in her chest before she went down, then she got back up. That's when I learned the rules. Headshots only. Complete destruction of the brain. Anything else just slows them down. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran. Grabbed a backpack from the camping section, started shoving things in. A hatchet, rope, water purification tablets, a small camping stove, whatever I could reach. Gary was shouting something about making a stand, about protecting the town. But I'd seen enough. The town was already gone. Through the window, I could see them coming down Main Street like a flood, dozens of them, and more appearing every minute as people panicked and got caught and turned. My truck was parked out back. I made it there, while Gary was still trying to organize a defense that would never work. I heard the screaming start as I peeled out of the parking lot, and I didn't look back. I drove north into the canyon country, taking logging roads and fire trails I knew from years of weekend hiking. The truck ran out of gas after about 60 miles, up near the rim of the Blackwater Canyon system. I'd seen the infected in 2 other small towns I'd passed, and I knew they were spreading faster than anyone could run. Radio was nothing but emergency tones and occasional screaming. Cell networks were already down. I hiked into the wilderness with my hastily packed bag and a growing understanding that the world I'd known was over. For 3 weeks, I survived like a scared animal. I stayed away from trails, avoided any sign of human presence, drank from streams, and ate cattail roots and the few fish I could catch with improvised traps. I saw smoke on the horizon, towns burning, I assumed, heard distant gunfire that gradually became less frequent, saw helicopters flying over occasionally, then not at all. I also saw the infected spreading into the wilderness. They didn't move in coordinated groups or anything like that. They wandered, following sound, following movement, following some instinct I didn't understand and didn't want to. I watched from a ridge as a group of maybe 30 of them stumbled through a valley, heading roughly north. They could walk for days without stopping, I realized. They didn't get tired the way living people did. I kept moving deeper into the canyon systems, staying high when I could, always looking for defensible positions. That's when I found the cliff. Blackwater Canyon has these massive sandstone walls, some of them rising 500 feet straight up from the canyon floor. Wind and water carved out overhangs and caves over millions of years, creating these sheltered spaces in the rock face. I'd climbed around these cliffs before, knew some of the formations, but I'd never really thought about them as places to live. I was hiding in a grove of juniper trees, watching a group of infected mill around below me, when I noticed the overhang across the canyon. It was maybe 120 feet up from the canyon floor, a deep hollow in the cliff face with a flat rock shelf jutting out like a porch. The overhang above it extended out another 15 feet, creating a natural roof. It was perfect, too high for the infected to reach, sheltered from weather, and the cliff face was climbable, barely, for someone who knew what they were doing. I spent 2 days watching the area, making sure the infected didn't linger. They seemed to follow the canyon floor, drawn by the creek that ran through it. They'd appear, wander through, and disappear around the bend. None of them looked up. Getting up there the first time nearly killed me. I had maybe 60 feet of rope in my bag, some climbing experience from my hiking days, and a lot of desperation. I found a dead tree that I could drag to the base of the cliff, positioned it against the rock face to get the first 20 feet of height. From there, I free climbed. My hands were bleeding by the time I hauled myself over the lip of the overhang. My arms felt like rubber, but I was up, and when I looked down at the canyon floor so far below, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, safe. The overhang was bigger than I'd thought. The shelf extended back into the cliff face about 20 feet, creating a space roughly 30 feet wide and 20 feet deep. The ceiling was high enough that I could stand upright in most places. Wind had blown in sand and debris over the years, creating a relatively flat floor. There were even some ancient pictographs on the back wall, handprints and geometric patterns left by people who'd used this shelter long before I was born. But being up there wasn't enough. I needed supplies. I needed to build something that could sustain me long term. And I needed to do it without getting killed. I climbed down 3 more times over the next week, each time scouting farther out, looking for anything useful. There was an abandoned ranger station about 5 miles east, and I hit it like a desperate scavenger, taking everything I could carry. Axes, saws, nails, tarps, more rope, a manual water pump, tools, batteries, a solar panel charging kit that some ranger had probably used for their electronics. I found a rifle with 2 boxes of ammunition in a locked cabinet that I pried open. Found canned food, dried beans, rice, water containers. Each trip back to the cliff loaded down with supplies was an exercise in terror. The infected were everywhere now, spreading through the wilderness in scattered groups. I learned to move silently, to freeze when I heard them, to circle miles out of my way to avoid them. I wore soft-soled shoes and wrapped cloth around anything that might clank or rattle. I became a ghost. The hardest part was getting supplies up the cliff. I rigged a pulley system using rope and a strong branch I'd wedged into a crack near the top. I'd climb up, pull the rope up, tie it to a loaded pack, and haul it up hand over hand. My shoulders burned, my hands developed calluses on top of calluses, but slowly, trip by trip, I built up a stockpile. Then, I started construction. I used the longest pieces of lumber I could find, some scavenged from the ranger station, some from an abandoned cabin I'd discovered. I created a platform that extended out from the overhang about 10 feet, supported by beams wedged into cracks in the rock face and tied off with every knot I knew. I reinforced it with crossbeams and covered the surface with plywood sheeting I'd carried up piece by piece. The platform became my main living space. I built walls using more lumber and tarp material, creating a structure that was half tent, half wooden cabin. I left the side facing outward more open, covered with a tarp I could roll up or down so I could see the canyon and get airflow. The back wall was the cliff face itself, solid rock. I created a rainwater collection system using tarps angled into buckets. I built a small fire pit using rocks I'd carried up, positioning it near the outer edge so smoke would dissipate into the open air rather than collect under the overhang. I hung my supplies from the ceiling using rope and hooks, protected from moisture and any creatures that might climb up. It took me 3 weeks to build what I started calling my hanging shelter. Every day was a gamble that the infected wouldn't find me while I was making my supply runs. Every night I climbed up to my platform and pulled the rope up after me, and every night I felt a little more secure. The view from up here is something else. I can see for miles down the canyon in both directions. The walls glow orange and red at sunset. Eagles nest on the cliff faces across from me. At night, the stars are so bright it's like they're hanging just out of reach. It's also quiet. That's what gets to you after a while. The silence. Before everything fell apart, there was always noise, cars, planes, people, electronics, the constant hum of civilization. Now there's just wind and the creek below, and occasionally the sounds of the infected moaning as they wander past. I've seen them down there countless times, sometimes alone, sometimes in groups. They move along the canyon floor like broken machines, following the path of least resistance. I've watched them walk straight into the creek and get swept away by the current. I've watched them claw at the cliff walls, trying to reach something they sensed but could never climb to. I've watched them stand in one spot for hours, swaying slightly, before suddenly moving on for no reason I can determine. They can't reach me here. That's the key to everything. That's why I'm still alive. Food was the next problem I had to solve. My stockpile of canned goods and rice would last a few months if I was careful, but I knew I couldn't rely on scavenging forever. Every trip down was a risk, and eventually, I'd run out of places to search or get caught or make a mistake. I needed renewable food sources. The creek below is full of fish, mostly trout and catfish. I built fishing lines using thread from rope I unraveled, hooks I fashioned from bent nails and wire, and weights made from small rocks. I'd lower these lines down from my platform during the day, using 100 feet of rope to reach the water. It took a lot of trial and error to figure out the right technique, the right bait. Insects worked best. The right time of day, early morning and dusk. But it works. I pull up 2 or 3 fish most days. I clean them on my platform, smoke the meat over my fire pit, store it in sealed containers. Fish becomes the protein that sustains me. I also cultivated cattails. The creek banks are lined with them, and I'd learned from my wilderness survival phase that they're almost entirely edible. Roots, shoots, pollen, everything. I'd climb down at night when the infected seemed less active, harvest cattail roots in the darkness, and climb back up before dawn. I'd process the roots into a flour-like substance that I could mix with water and cook into flat cakes. There are wild onions and garlic growing in scattered patches along the canyon, wild berries in season, mulberries, serviceberries, hackberries. I learned which plants were edible through careful experimentation and vague memories of wilderness guides I'd read years ago. I got sick a few times from eating the wrong things, but I learned. I set up a small garden on my platform using soil I'd hauled up in bags, started growing things from seeds I'd found in an abandoned homestead, beans, squash, some herbs. The growing season is short this high up, and the platform doesn't get full sun all day because of the overhang. But some things grow. Every bean I harvest feels like a victory. Water comes from the rain collection system and from trips down to the creek. I purify everything, boiling it or running it through the filter pump I salvaged. I've gotten sick from bad water before, and I learned that lesson hard. Dysentery when you're alone in the wilderness and your toilet is a bucket. You have to haul up and down a cliff face is an experience I never want to repeat. I keep track of days by carving notches into one of the support beams. 47 notches now. 47 days of waking up to the sound of wind moving through the canyon. 47 days of checking my fishing lines, tending my meager garden, rationing my supplies. 47 days of survival. The routine keeps me sane, I think. Wake at dawn. Check the lines. Start a small fire if I need to cook, or if it's cold enough to justify the risk of smoke. Eat a small meal, usually fish and cattail cakes, maybe some wild greens if I've gathered them recently. Spend the morning doing maintenance on the shelter, checking ropes for wear, reinforcing joints, organizing supplies. Midday is for watching. I sit on the edge of my platform with my legs dangling over the side, and I watch the canyon. I watch for infected, yes, but also for animals, for weather changes, for anything different or unusual. I've learned to read the canyon like a book. I know when a storm is coming by, the way the clouds build up over the western rim. I know when infected are approaching by the way the birds go quiet. Afternoons I spend on projects. I'm slowly improving the shelter, adding features, making it more livable. I built a better door for the enclosed section where I sleep, using leather hinges from a belt I found. I created a water storage system with multiple containers, so I always have reserves. I'm working on a better composting toilet system that doesn't require me to climb down as often. Evenings are for fishing and foraging if I need to make a night climb. Dusk is the most dangerous time for going down. The infected seem more active, more alert somehow. But it's also when the fish bite best and when I can move with some cover of darkness. Nights are long. I sit by my small fire and think too much. I think about my mother. She was living in Denver when everything started, and I have no idea if she made it. I think about the people from Millbrook, wonder how many of them are still human, still alive. I think about Gary Cole standing in Henderson's hardware store, trying to organize a defense with his shaking hands. I think about Mrs. Patterson in her bloody floral dress. Sometimes I talk to myself, just to hear a human voice. I narrate what I'm doing like I'm teaching a class. Now we're going to check the structural integrity of the eastern support beam. See how the rope is worn here? We'll need to reinforce that. It's crazy, I know, but it helps. I've started dreaming about the world before, not nightmares about the infected, but dreams about normal things. Standing in line at a coffee shop, driving to work, browsing the aisles at a grocery store, overwhelmed by choices. I wake up from these dreams, and for a moment I forget where I am, and then I see the rock ceiling of the overhang above me and remember everything. Day 53. Something new happened today. I was pulling up my morning fishing line when I heard them. Not the usual lone shuffling of infected passing below, but a large group. I peered over the edge and counted at least 40 of them moving through the canyon in a loose cluster. They were following the creek, and they were moving faster than I'd usually seen them move. They weren't running. Infected don't run. I'd learned that early on. But they were walking with more purpose, more direction, like they were being drawn towards something. I watched them disappear around the southern bend of the canyon, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Large groups were bad news. Large groups meant either something was drawing them or they'd managed to coordinate somehow, and I didn't like either possibility. I spent the rest of the day on edge, watching, listening. Around noon, I heard sounds from the south, distant but distinct. Gunfire, a lot of it. Automatic weapons from the sound of it. Then explosions, small ones, like grenades. Someone else was alive out there. Someone was fighting. The gunfire lasted maybe 20 minutes, then stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I waited, watching the southern bend, wondering if I'd see survivors coming north, seeking refuge. What came instead were more infected. Hundreds of them. They flooded through the canyon like a river, shambling and stumbling over the rocky terrain, but moving inexorably north. Some fell into the creek and were carried away. Others got caught in narrow passages and created bottlenecks where the ones behind just pushed forward, climbing over each other. I pulled back from the edge and stayed silent, barely breathing as they passed below. The sound of them was awful. The moaning, the shuffling feet, the occasional crash as one fell or knocked into something. It went on for hours. When they finally thinned out and passed, I counted roughly 500, maybe more. The largest concentration I'd seen since Millbrook fell. Whoever had been fighting to the south, they'd lost, and they'd sent every infected in the region north into my canyon. I didn't sleep that night. I kept my rifle loaded and sat watching the darkness, listening to the sporadic sounds of infected still wandering past below. My mind raced through scenarios. What if they found a way up? What if they tried to climb? What if one of them was a climber, retained enough coordination and muscle memory from before? But they can't climb, I reminded myself. I'd watched them try. They couldn't manage basic problem solving anymore, couldn't coordinate their movements enough for something as complex as scaling a cliff face. Still, I didn't sleep. Day 58. The horde has mostly passed, but there are still stragglers. I count a dozen infected in the canyon at any given time now, wandering aimlessly. Before the horde, I might go days without seeing any. The density has changed. The canyon isn't my private refuge anymore. I've had to adapt my routine. No more daytime climbs down, too risky with so many of them around. I go down only at night and only when absolutely necessary. I move slower, more carefully. Every handhold, every footstep has to be silent. Last night I needed water. My collection barrels were running low, and we hadn't had rain in over a week. I waited until well after dark, then climbed down with my water containers strapped to my back. The climb down is always worse than the climb up. You can't see where you're putting your feet. You have to feel for holds, and the whole time you're acutely aware of the void beneath you. One slip, one loose rock, one moment of carelessness, and you fall. And if you survive the fall, you've got the infected to deal with. I made it down and moved to the creek using a route I'd memorized in daylight. The moon was nearly full, which helped, but also made me more visible. I could see 3 infected about 50 yards downstream, standing knee-deep in the water like broken statues. I filled my containers as quietly as I could, the sound of the creek helping to mask the noise. One of the infected downstream turned its head toward me. Whether it heard something or just turned randomly, I don't know. And I froze. I stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes, not moving, barely breathing, water soaking into my boots from the creek. The infected turned away. I finished filling my containers and climbed back up, my arms burning from the weight, my heart hammering the entire way. I'm going to need a better water solution. This is unsustainable. Day 64. I rigged up a longer rope system today, running a line from my platform down to the creek with a bucket attached. It's primitive, but it works. I can lower the bucket, let it fill, and haul it back up. It takes forever, and the bucket only holds maybe 2 gallons, but it means I don't have to climb down as often. The garden is doing poorly. 2 of my bean plants died, I think from lack of adequate sunlight. The herbs are surviving but not thriving. I'm going to have to accept that agriculture isn't going to be a major food source up here. I'm dependent on fishing, foraging, and my dwindling stockpile of preserved goods. I've been thinking about the ranger station. There was a storage shed there I didn't fully search, too worried about the infected in the area and trying to carry everything in one trip. But I'd seen shelves through the window, what looked like more supplies. If I could get back there, if I could do a more thorough search. But it's 10 miles round trip and the canyon is thick with infected now. The risk might be greater than the reward. I'll wait, I'll watch, I'll ration what I have more carefully. Day 71. Something happened today that I'm still trying to process. I was sitting on my platform in the afternoon, mending a tear in one of my tarps with fishing line and a makeshift needle, when I heard a sound above me. Not below where the infected wander, but above, on the cliff top. I looked up and saw a deer standing at the rim, maybe 40 feet above my position. A buck, 8-point antlers, looking down at the canyon. I'd seen wildlife before, the eagles, ravens, small mammals, but nothing this large, this close. The deer was swaying slightly, and at first I thought it was just shifting its weight. Then I realized it was swaying the way the infected sway, that same purposeless movement, that same lack of coordination. I grabbed my rifle and watched. The deer took a step forward, then another. It was moving toward the edge, and there was something wrong with its gait. It stumbled, caught itself, took another step. It went over the edge. The deer fell 40 feet and hit the roof of my shelter with a crash that sounded like the world ending. The impact shattered some of the wooden framework and sent one of my water barrels tumbling over the side. The deer's body rolled, slid across the angled tarp roof, and got caught on one of the support beams. I could see it clearly now. Its eyes were filmed over, cloudy white. Its mouth was open, tongue hanging out, and there was foam mixed with something dark around its muzzle. One of its legs was broken, had been broken before the fall from the look of it, and twisted at an impossible angle. And it was still moving. The deer thrashed on my roof, its good legs kicking, its head swinging back and forth. It was making sounds, horrible wet choking sounds that weren't like any noise a deer should make. I could see the damage from the fall, ribs caved in, blood leaking from its mouth and nose. But it kept moving. The infected can spread to animals. I'd heard rumors before everything collapsed, speculation on the radio. But I hadn't seen proof until now. I raised my rifle and put a round through the deer's skull. It stopped moving. Now, I had a dead infected deer on my roof, and the crash had probably attracted every wandering infected in the canyon. I spent the next 2 hours in tense silence, rifle ready, watching the canyon floor. 6 infected appeared, drawn by the sound. They milled around the base of the cliff, looking up occasionally, moaning. One of them tried to climb, made it maybe 5 feet up the rock face before losing its grip and falling. It got up and tried again. They can't climb. I kept telling myself that. They can't climb. Eventually, they wandered off, whatever stimulus had drawn them fading from their damaged minds. I waited until dark, then used my rope to secure the deer's body and lower it over the side. I couldn't afford to have it rotting on my roof, attracting scavengers or filling my living space with the smell of decay. The body hit the canyon floor with a distant thud. 3 infected appeared within minutes, drawn by the sound or the smell. They began to feed on the deer's corpse. I watched them through the scope of my rifle and felt sick. Not because of the feeding, I'd seen worse, but because of what it confirmed. The infection spread to animals, which meant the wildlife I'd been relying on for food, the deer and rabbits and birds, they were all potential vectors. Every protein source I depended on was now suspect. Day 74. I've been inspecting every fish I catch now, looking for signs of infection. Cloudy eyes, strange behavior, anything unusual. So far they all look normal, but I don't know if fish can even catch it. I don't know the rules anymore. I've stopped eating any meat I find already dead. Before, if I found a rabbit that had died from a fall, or a bird that hit the cliff face, I'd cook it and eat it, grateful for the calories. Now I'm terrified that it died from infection, that cooking won't be enough to destroy whatever causes this. My food situation is getting critical. I've got maybe 3 weeks of rice and beans left. The fishing has been good, but I can't live on fish alone. I need variety, need other nutrients. I'm going to have to make another supply run. The ranger station is the closest option, but with the canyon full of infected, I need a different route. I've been studying the cliff faces with the binoculars I salvaged. There's a route up the eastern wall that might be climbable, a series of ledges and cracks that could get me to the rim. From there, I could travel overland to the ranger station, avoiding the canyon floor entirely. It's risky. If I fall, I die. If I get caught on the rim with no quick way down, I die. But if I stay here and starve, I die anyway. I'll give it a few more days, scout the route, make sure I'm ready. Day 78. I climbed the eastern wall today. It took 4 hours to reach the rim, and my hands are shredded from gripping the sharp sandstone. There were 2 sections where I had to chimney climb between. Rock faces, my back pressed against one wall and my feet against the other, shuffling upward an inch at a time. But I made it. The rim is a different world. Pine and juniper forest, broken by clearings of scrub brush and rock. I could see for miles. The canyon cutting through the landscape like a wound, other canyons branching off in the distance, mountains to the north with snow still on their peaks. I could also see smoke, multiple columns of it scattered across the landscape, towns burning, or maybe survivors with campfires. No way to tell from this distance. I moved through the forest carefully, rifle ready, listening for any sound of infected. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. Just wind in the trees and my own breathing. I found a trail, an old hiking path that I vaguely remembered from before. Followed it east toward where the ranger station should be. Saw my first infected about a mile in. It was a woman in jogging clothes, or what remained of them. She'd probably been out for a run when the infection caught her, and she'd been wandering ever since. The jogging clothes were torn and filthy, her athletic shoes worn down to nothing. She was missing most of the skin on one arm, the flesh rotted away to expose bone. She didn't see me. I circled wide, keeping downwind, and continued on. The ranger station was worse than I had hoped, but better than I had feared. The main building had been ransacked, doors broken in, windows smashed, blood on the walls. Someone had made a stand here and lost, but the storage shed was intact. The door was locked with a padlock that I broke with a rock. Inside, I found treasure. 3 50-pound bags of rice, 2 cases of canned vegetables, a case of canned soup, water purification tablets, batteries, a hand crank radio, a medical kit that hadn't been touched, boxes of .22 ammunition that didn't fit my rifle, but I took anyway in case I found a different weapon, bags of dried beans, lentils, split peas, salt, sugar, coffee. I almost cried when I found the coffee. I loaded up my pack until I could barely lift it, then loaded up a second pack I'd brought and slung it across my chest. I was carrying maybe 80 pounds of supplies, and I still had to climb back down the cliff face. I made 3 trips, hid the supplies I couldn't carry in the forest near the cliff rim, climbed down with 1 load, hauled it back to my shelter, climbed back up, and repeated. Each climb took hours. By the time I'd brought everything down, the sun was setting and my hands were bleeding through the makeshift gloves I'd made from cloth. But I had supplies, months' worth of food if I was careful. I wouldn't starve, at least not soon. That night, I made coffee for the first time in almost 3 months. I sat on my platform, watching the stars emerge, sipping bitter instant coffee that I'd made too strong, and I felt something close to happiness. Day 85. The coffee is already gone. I tried to ration it, make it last, but I failed. I drank the last of it this morning, and now I'm back to drinking plain water and feeling sorry for myself. The weather is turning, colder at night, frost on the rocks in the morning. I've been reinforcing my shelter, hanging more tarps to block the wind, building up my firewood stockpile. Winter is coming, and winter this high up in the canyon country is serious business. I need warmer clothes. I need more blankets. I need to figure out a heating solution that doesn't require burning through all my firewood. There was a cabin about 3 miles southwest of the ranger station, I remember. I saw it on one of my hikes years ago, an old homesteader's place, abandoned but still standing. If it's still there, if it hasn't been completely looted, there might be cold weather gear inside. Another trip to the rim, another risk, but necessary. Day 89, I found the cabin. It had been occupied recently. There were signs of a camp inside, empty food containers, a sleeping bag, spent ammunition. But whoever had been there was gone now, and they'd left in a hurry. I found what I was looking for, though. A heavy wool blanket that smelled like smoke and mildew but was intact. A winter coat, too large for me, but I could make it work. Thermal underwear, thick socks, a knit hat. I also found something else, a journal. The handwriting was shaky, the entries short and increasingly desperate. I read through it while sitting on the cabin floor, my rifle across my lap, listening for any sound of infected outside. The writer's name was Derek Kovacs. He'd survived the initial outbreak in some town called Ridgemont, fled into the wilderness with his family, a wife named Amy and a daughter named Emma. They'd made it to this cabin, thought they were safe. Amy got bit on day 12. Derek wrote about trying to save her, trying to convince himself that she was fighting it off, that she'd be the one person immune. She turned on day 14, and he had to. The entry ended mid-sentence. He and Emma survived another 3 weeks. The last entries were about Emma getting sick, not infected, just sick. A fever that wouldn't break. He wrote about not having medicine, about the fever getting worse. about Emma asking for her mother. The journal ended on what he marked as Day 43. Emma died this morning. I buried her next to Amy behind the cabin. I can't do this anymore. I found the graves behind the cabin, 2 mounds of rocks. I stood there for a long time looking at them, thinking about Derek and Amy and Emma. Thinking about all the small personal apocalypses happening in cabins and houses and shelters all across the world. I took the warm clothes and left the journal on the table where I'd found it. It felt wrong to take it, like I'd be erasing them somehow. On the way back to the canyon rim, I saw more infected than I'd seen on my first trip. They were spreading out from the canyon, moving through the forest in scattered groups. One grabbed at me from behind a tree. I'd walked right past it without seeing it, and I barely managed to dodge. I put my knife through its eye socket and kept moving, my heart racing. The forest isn't safe anymore. Nowhere is safe. Day 94. Winter is definitely here now. I woke up this morning to find snow covering my platform, the canyon walls dusted white. It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Beautiful because the snow makes everything clean and quiet and peaceful. Terrifying because I'm living on a platform suspended under a cliff overhang with winter storms coming. I've sealed up most of the gaps in my shelter using the tarp and some pine boughs I collected. I built a better windbreak on the side that faces the prevailing winds. I'm burning small fires day and night now, just enough to keep from freezing. The fishing has slowed down with the cold. The fish are going deeper, less active. I'm catching maybe 1 fish every other day now, instead of 2 or 3 daily. I've started rationing my rice and beans more carefully, calculating calories, trying to make the supplies stretch. I saw something strange today. A raven landed on the railing I'd built at the edge of my platform. Just a railing made of branches lashed together, something to keep me from rolling off in my sleep. The raven sat there looking at me with its black eyes, and I looked back. I've always heard ravens are smart, that they use tools and solve problems and remember faces. This one cocked its head, made a clicking sound in its throat, then flew off. I threw a small piece of fish after it, watching it spiral down into the canyon. The raven swooped and caught it midair, then flew back and landed on the railing again. It ate the fish while watching me. I spent the next hour tossing small bits of fish to the raven. It would catch them, eat them, and come back for more. When I ran out of fish scraps, it made that clicking sound again and flew away. I think I've made a friend, or at least an acquaintance. It's the first interaction I've had with another living thing in months that didn't involve one of us trying to kill the other. Day 102. The raven comes back almost every day now. I've started calling it Grip, after a raven in a book I read once. Grip has learned that if it shows up around midday, I'll have fish scraps, or sometimes a piece of cattail cake. We've developed a routine. Grip lands on the railing, makes its clicking sound, and I toss it food. Sometimes it brings things, shiny objects, pieces of string, once a bottle cap. I don't know if it's trading or just showing off, but I keep the objects in a small pile in the corner of my shelter. Having another living creature around, even a bird, even one that's just using me for food, helps. I talk to Grip sometimes. Tell it about my day, about the infected I've seen below, about my plans and fears. Grip doesn't answer, obviously, but it listens. Or at least, it stays perched there while I talk, which is close enough. The infected activity in the canyon has decreased with the cold. I'm seeing fewer of them, and the ones I do see move slower, more sluggish. I don't know if the cold affects them or if they've just migrated elsewhere, following some stimulus I can't perceive. Day 10. A storm rolled through last night that nearly killed me. It started around sunset, wind picking up, temperature dropping fast, snow beginning to fall in thick sheets. I'd weathered storms before, but this one was different. The wind howled through the canyon with a sound like screaming, and the gusts hit my shelter with enough force to make the whole platform shake. Around midnight, one of my main support beams cracked. I heard it over the sound of the wind, a sharp, splintering sound that sent ice through my veins. The platform tilted maybe 10 degrees suddenly, and everything that wasn't tied down went sliding toward the edge. I grabbed my rifle in my pack and pressed myself against the back wall, against the solid rock, as far from the edge as I could get. The platform groaned and swayed, and I could hear the ropes straining against the wind. If the platform went, I went with it. 100-foot fall onto the rocks below. I spent the night braced against that wall, listening to the storm and the sound of my shelter tearing apart, certain that every gust would be the one that sent me over the edge. The storm broke around dawn. When there was enough light to see, I crawled out and surveyed the damage. The eastern support beam had split along a grain line I hadn't noticed. The platform was sagging on that side, held up by the ropes more than the beam now. Half of my roof had torn away in the wind. My fire pit had scattered rocks and ash everywhere. 2 of my water containers were gone, tumbled over the edge at some point during the night. But the platform held. Barely, but it held. I spent the next 2 days doing emergency repairs. I reinforced the broken beam using a smaller piece of lumber lashed alongside it. I redistributed the weight on the platform, moving my heavier supplies toward the western side. I rigged new ropes and tied them off to different anchor points in the rock. I couldn't replace the roof. I'd used the last of my good tarp material. The overhang above provides some protection from rain and snow, but now the wind and cold get in more easily. I'm going to need more supplies before the next storm. More rope, more lumber, more tarp, which means another trip to the rim, probably back to the ranger station or maybe farther out to find another source. But not yet. I need to recover first. Need to make sure the repairs I've made will hold. Need to build my strength back up because I've lost weight. I can see it in my hands, feel it in how my clothes hang loose. Day 118. Grip didn't show up today. First time in weeks it's missed its regular visit. I'm more worried about this than I should be. It's just a bird, just a scavenger using me for easy food. But still, I found myself watching the sky all afternoon, looking for that familiar black shape. I wonder if the storm got it. Ravens are tough, adaptable, but that storm was fierce. I hope it's okay. I hope it comes back tomorrow. Day 119. No grip again. I'm starting to accept that it's probably gone, dead from the storm, or moved on to a better food source, or just done with me. I sat on the edge of my platform tonight and felt the loneliness like a physical weight. I haven't seen another human being in over 100 days. Haven't heard another human voice. The only sounds are wind and water and the occasional moaning of infected far below. I'm talking to myself more now. Full conversations, debating decisions out loud, narrating my actions like I'm teaching a class to invisible students. Now we're going to check the fishing line. See how the bait is gone, but no catch? That means the fish are getting smarter, or we're using the wrong bait. It's crazy behavior, I know that. But it helps maintain some sense of normalcy, some feeling that I'm still a person and not just a survival machine. Day 121. Grip came back. I was pulling up my morning fishing line when I heard the familiar clicking sound and looked up to see Grip landing on the railing. It looked fine, no injuries from the storm that I could see. It made its clicking sound, and I laughed, actually laughed out loud, and threw it a piece of fish. Grip caught the fish and settled down to eat it, looking at me with those black eyes, and I felt absurdly grateful. "Where were you?" I asked it. I was worried. Grip made a different sound, almost like a chuckle, and I chose to believe it was saying it appreciated my concern. I know I'm anthropomorphizing, projecting human emotions onto a bird that just wants food. But I don't care. Grip is my friend, and I'm glad it's back. Day 127. Something new happened today. Something that's forced me to reconsider everything I thought I knew about the infected. I was watching the canyon floor through my binoculars in the afternoon when I saw a movement on the cliff face across from me. Not at the bottom, but about halfway up, maybe 60 feet off the ground. An infected was climbing the cliff. I watched in disbelief as it slowly, clumsily, made its way up the rock face. It wasn't coordinated climbing, not like a human rock climber would do, but It was climbing, finding handholds, pulling itself up, moving higher. It fell twice while I watched, both times dropping 10 or 15 feet before catching itself on a ledge or outcropping. Each time, it would pause for a moment, swaying slightly, then resume climbing. I grabbed my rifle and watched it through the scope, my hands shaking. This changed everything. If infected could learn to climb, or if some of them retained enough coordination for it, then my shelter wasn't safe. Nothing vertical was safe. The infected made it about 80 feet up before it lost its grip and fell. It hit the canyon floor with a sound I could hear even from my distance, and it didn't get up. The fall had caved in its skull, but it had climbed. It had climbed 80 feet. I spent the rest of the day watching the canyon, looking for any other climbers. I didn't see any. Maybe that one was an outlier, someone who'd been a climber before infection and retained some muscle memory. Maybe it was a one-time thing. But maybe it wasn't. Day 131. I've been reinforcing my defenses. I can't do much about the climb up to my shelter. The cliff face is what it is. But I can make the platform itself harder to access. I've extended the floor outward another 3 feet using scavenged wood, creating an overhang around the perimeter. If something did manage to climb up, it would have to somehow get past that overhang to reach the platform. It's not perfect, but it's something. I've also moved my most critical supplies, the food, the medical kit, the ammunition, into a bag that I keep with me at all times. If I have to abandon the shelter in a hurry, I can grab that bag and my rifle and climb. Where I would climb to, I don't know. But it's better than being caught. I've been having nightmares about infected crawling up the cliff face like spiders surrounding the platform, reaching for me. I wake up with my heart racing, grabbing for my rifle in the dark. Day 138. The weather has been clear for the past week, cold but clear. I've been using the good weather to stockpile firewood. I climb down in the morning when the infected activity is lowest, gather wood from the canyon floor and the lower slopes, and haul it back up. It's exhausting work. Each trip up with a load of wood leaves me shaking and gasping for breath. But I need the wood. Winter is only going to get worse, and I need to stay warm. I saw a pack of coyotes today down in the canyon, 5 of them moving along the creek. They looked healthy, not infected, and I watched them hunt a rabbit. They moved with coordination, worked as a team, brought down the rabbit, and shared the kill. It gave me hope, seeing normal animal behavior, seeing something survive and thrive in this new world. Then 2 infected came around the bend, and the coyotes scattered. The infected wandered through where the coyotes had been, oblivious to the rabbit carcass, oblivious to everything except whatever internal drive keeps them moving. Day 145. I found human tracks today. Fresh ones, less than a day old, up on the rim. I was scouting for a new route down to a different section of the canyon when I saw them in a patch of snow. Boot prints, human-sized, moving west along the rim. Whoever made them was alive. The stride was too regular, too purposeful to be infected. I followed the tracks for about a quarter mile before I lost them where they crossed onto bare rock. I called out a few times, softly, hoping for a response. Nothing. Someone else is alive out here, alive and mobile and cautious enough to survive this long. Part of me wants to find them, wants to make contact, wants human interaction so badly it's like a hunger. But another part is terrified. I don't know who they are, what they've done to survive, whether they'd see me as a threat or a resource to exploit. In the world before, I'd have sought them out without hesitation. Now, I don't know. The rules are different now. I made my way back to my shelter and didn't follow the tracks farther. But I think about them. I wonder who made them, where they're going, if they're alone or part of a group. Day 152. A heavy snow last night, nearly a foot of accumulation on the platform. I spent the morning clearing it off, worried about the extra weight stressing the damaged support beam. The cold is getting serious now. I'm burning through firewood faster than I'd like, trying to keep the temperature inside my shelter above freezing. My hands are developing chilblains. My lips are cracked and bleeding. I'm wearing every piece of clothing I own, and I'm still cold. Food is holding up okay. I've got enough rice and beans to last another 2 months if I'm careful. The fishing is almost impossible now. The creek has ice forming along the edges, and the fish are barely active. I caught 1 small trout this week, that's all. I'm losing weight. I can see my ribs now when I wash. My face looks gaunt when I catch my reflection in the metal cup I use for drinking. I'm burning more calories staying warm than I'm taking in from food. I need to eat more, but I also need to make supplies last. It's a calculation I run constantly, trying to find the balance that keeps me alive longest. Day 159. Something fell from the cliff above me today. I was inside my shelter trying to stay warm when I heard the sound of impact on my roof, similar to when the infected deer fell, but smaller. Something heavy hitting the tarp and rolling. I grabbed my rifle and went out to investigate. It took me a few minutes to spot it. The body had rolled down to where the roof met the rock face. It was an infected, but not like any I'd seen before. It was frozen solid, ice crystals covering its clothes and exposed skin. It had fallen from the cliff top, probably wandered too close to the edge in its mindless way. The frozen infected looked almost peaceful, preserved like some ancient body found in a glacier. Its eyes were closed, its mouth slightly open. A man, maybe 40 years old, wearing a winter jacket that hadn't saved him from either infection or freezing. I used a pole to push the body off the roof. It slid down the angled surface and tumbled over the edge, falling to the canyon floor below. I heard the impact, the ice-rigid body shattering like glass. It's a grim reminder. The infected are still up there on the rim, still wandering, still falling. The cliff above me is a constant threat of dead things raining down. Day 169. I saw the tracks again today. The same boot prints, or similar ones, this time on the eastern rim about a mile from my shelter. They were heading north, following the canyon edge. I didn't follow them this time either, but I'm becoming more convinced that it's one person, alone, traveling through the area. They're being careful, staying away from obvious shelter sites, moving regularly. Smart survival strategy. Stay mobile, don't linger in one place too long, reduce the risk of being cornered. It's the opposite of my strategy. I've put everything into this shelter, into staying in one defended location. If I have to leave, if something forces me out, I've got nowhere to go. Different approaches to the same problem: how to stay alive. Day 173. Grip brought me something different today. Instead of the usual shiny objects or random debris, it dropped a silver ring on my platform. A wedding ring, I think, with some kind of inscription on the inside that I can't quite make out. I sat there holding this ring, wondering whose finger it had been on, what happened to them, how this ring ended up in a raven's collection of interesting objects. I put it with the other things Grip has brought me. A little pile of pre-apocalypse debris, the bottle cap, some wire, a button, a piece of colored glass, and now a wedding ring. Each object is a tiny story I'll never know. Day 180. 6 months. I've survived 6 months in this hanging shelter. 6 months since I fled Millbrook. 6 months since the world ended. I marked the day by eating an extra portion of rice with my fish, a small celebration. Grip got extra scraps too, though it doesn't know why. 6 months. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime. Sometimes like it just happened yesterday. I can still see Gary Cole's shaking hands, still hear the screaming in the streets, still smell the smoke from the burning buildings. I wonder how many people are left. Hundreds, thousands, millions. There's no way to know. The radio I brought up picks up nothing but static and occasional bursts of what might be automated broadcasts, repeating emergency messages to an audience that's probably all dead or infected. I tried to transmit a few times, using the hand crank generator to power the radio, broadcasting on emergency frequencies. This is anyone who can hear this. I'm alive in the Blackwater Canyon system. I'm surviving. If anyone's out there, please respond. Nothing. Just my own voice bouncing into the void. Maybe I'm the only one left in this region. Maybe those boot prints I've been seeing are from someone who passed through and moved on, someone who's already dead or infected now. Or maybe there are others like me, hiding in their own shelters, afraid to make contact, afraid to trust. Day 187. The cold broke today. Not spring yet, but a warm front moved through and the temperature got above freezing for the first time in weeks. The snow on the platform melted into slush, water dripping everywhere, and I spent the afternoon moving supplies to keep them dry. With the warmth came sounds from below. The infected, sluggish in the deep cold, became more active. I could hear them moaning, moving along the canyon floor. I counted 11 of them through my binoculars, more than I'd seen in weeks. The thaw also brought smells. The frozen bodies that had fallen from the rim, the deer carcass I'd pushed over months ago, other things I couldn't identify. All of it began to thaw and rot. The smell drifted up to my shelter, sweet and sickening. I tied a cloth over my nose and mouth and tried not to breathe too deeply. Day 194. I had to make another supply run. My firewood was running critically low, and while the weather had warmed a bit, I knew it would get cold again. This is the mountains, and winter doesn't give up easily. I climbed down before dawn and worked quickly, gathering wood and stacking it at the base of the cliff. I was on my 4th trip, arms full of dry branches when I heard them. Voices, human voices. I dropped the wood and froze, listening. The voices were coming from downstream around the southern bend. 2 people, maybe 3, talking in normal conversational tones. Couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm of speech was unmistakable. Survivors, real, living people. I crept toward the sound, moving from rock to rock, staying low. The creak noise covered my movement. I got within about 50 yards and found a position behind a large boulder where I could see without being seen. There were 3 of them, 2 men and a woman, all armed, all wearing heavy backpacks. They were moving north along the creek, picking their way over the rocks, heading in the direction of my shelter. They looked healthy, alert. They moved like people who knew what they were doing, covering each other's positions, watching for threats. Military training, maybe, or just hard-earned survival experience. I watched them approach, my heart hammering, trying to decide what to do. Reveal myself? Stay hidden? They hadn't done anything threatening, but they were armed and I was alone and vulnerable. The decision was made for me. One of the men spotted the firewood I'd stacked at the base of the cliff. He stopped, held up a fist, a military signal, and the other 2 froze. They spread out slightly, weapons ready, scanning the area. "Someone's been here recently," the man said, loud enough for me to hear. "Firewood's fresh cut." They began searching the area, methodical and efficient. It was only a matter of time before they found me or found my shelter or both. I stood up slowly, hands visible and empty, my rifle slung across my back. "I'm here," I called out. "I'm not infected, I'm not a threat." All 3 of their weapons swung toward me. I kept my hands up, didn't move. "Step out where we can see you," the woman said. She had a shotgun, and it was pointed at my chest. I stepped out from behind the boulder, hands still up. "I'm alone. I've got a shelter nearby. I'm just gathering firewood." The 3 of them looked at each other, some kind of silent communication passing between them. Then, the first man lowered his weapon slightly. An AR-15 style rifle, well maintained. "How long have you been here?" he asked. 6 months, I said. "Since everything fell apart." "You've survived alone for 6 months?" The woman sounded skeptical. "I've got a shelter up there." I gestured at the cliff face above us. "Under the overhang, it's defensible." They looked up, and I could see them trying to spot my platform. From their angle, it was probably barely visible. "Impressive," the second man said. He was older, gray in his beard, carrying a hunting rifle. "Smart choice getting vertical." "What are your names?" I asked. They looked at each other again. The woman spoke first. "Hey, I'm Alex. This is Patterson." She indicated the first man. "And that's Hollis." She gestured at the older man. I hesitated, Realized I hadn't said my own name out loud in months. I'm Jordan. Well, Jordan, Patterson said. We're heading north. Heard there might be a safe zone up near the Montana border, some kind of fortified settlement. You're welcome to join us if you want. A safe zone. The possibility seemed almost absurd, like something from a dream, but I could see they believed it, or at least hoped it was true. How far? I asked. 200 miles, give or take, Hollis said. 2 weeks on foot if we don't run into trouble, month if we do. 200 miles through infected territory, with people I'd just met, abandoning the shelter I'd spent 6 months building and defending. I looked up at my platform, thought about my supplies, my routines, the safety I'd created for myself. Then, I thought about spending another 6 months alone, talking to a raven, slowly running out of food and firewood and options. Can I think about it? I asked. I need some time. We're not staying in this canyon, Alex said. Too exposed, too many infected funneling through. We're moving on at first light tomorrow. If you want to come, meet us at the northern end of the canyon where it opens up. Otherwise, good luck. They moved on, heading north, and I stayed behind watching them disappear around the bend. Human contact. The possibility of other survivors, a community, safety in numbers, or the risk of betrayal, of being slowed down in a group, of losing the independence that had kept me alive. I climbed back to my shelter with my firewood and spent the rest of the day thinking. Day 195. I didn't go. I woke up at dawn, my pack ready, my most essential supplies sorted, prepared to climb down and meet them. Then, I sat on the edge of my platform watching the sky lighten, and I couldn't do it. This shelter has kept me alive for 6 months. I know every support beam, every rope, every crack in the rock face. I know the patterns of the infected below, the behavior of the weather, the best times to fish and forage. I've built something here, earned my survival day by day. Leaving feels like abandoning that. Trusting strangers feels dangerous in a way that facing infected doesn't. So I stayed. I watched the northern end of the canyon through my binoculars around the time they'd said they'd be leaving. I saw them, 3 figures making their way out of the canyon and disappearing into the forest beyond. Part of me screamed that I'd made a mistake, that I'd just passed up my best chance at finding other survivors, but another part, the part that's kept me alive this long, said I'd made the right choice. I may never know which part was right. Day 203. The weather has turned again, another cold snap moving through. The brief warm spell is over, and we're back to below freezing at night. I'm burning through my firewood steadily, and I'll need to make more gathering trips soon. Grip hasn't visited in 3 days. I worry about it in the cold. Do ravens migrate? Do they hole up somewhere when the weather gets bad? I don't know enough about their behavior. The canyon is quiet. The infected activity has decreased again with the cold. I saw 2 of them yesterday, both moving slowly, one of them falling into the creek and getting swept away. I've started thinking about spring. What I'll need to do to prepare, how I'll rebuild my garden, whether I'll try to expand the shelter or just maintain what I have. Long-term survival. That's what I'm committed to now. Not rescue, not escape, just survival day by day, season by season, for as long as I can manage. Day 211. Something happened today that's shaken me badly. I was fishing from my platform, my line down in the creek below, when I heard a sound on the cliff face. Not from above where things fall, but from the side, at the same level as my shelter. Scratching, scraping, the sound of something moving on rock. I grabbed my rifle and moved to the edge, looking along the cliff face. At first I couldn't see anything in the shadows and the irregular rock. Then, movement caught my eye. An infected woman was climbing along a narrow ledge, maybe 20 feet away from my platform. She was moving sideways, pressed against the rock, her hands gripping tiny holds. She was moving toward me. I watched in horror as she made her way along the ledge, slow but deliberate. She wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead, unfocused, but she was coming in my direction. I lined up a shot with my rifle, waiting for a clear moment, trying to decide if shooting was worth the noise it would make. The infected woman took another sideways step, reached for a handhold, and her foot slipped. She fell, dropping away from the cliff face, tumbling through the air. She hit the canyon floor and didn't move. But she'd almost made it. Another 10 feet of ledge, and she would have been at my platform. I spent the rest of the day examining the cliff face around my shelter, looking for routes that infected could potentially use. I found 3 narrow ledges that could be, followed by something with enough coordination, 3 paths that could lead from the canyon floor to my position. I can't block them all. The cliff face is what it is, but I can be more vigilant, can watch for climbers, can position myself to defend against approach from multiple angles. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with my rifle across my lap, watching the shadows, listening for the sound of scraping on stone. Day 218. I've reinforced the perimeter of my platform with sharpened stakes angled outward, creating a kind of barrier that would be difficult for infected to cross, even if they made it to the platform level. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. Grip returned today, looking ruffled and hungry. I gave it fish, and it ate ravenously, then settled down on the railing to preen. I was absurdly happy to see it. "Rough few days?" I asked it. Grip made its clicking sound, and I took that as agreement. The temperature has stabilized a bit, cold, but not the brutal deep freeze of the worst winter days. I can function outside my shelter without risking frostbite, which makes daily tasks easier. I've started thinking about the future in ways I hadn't before, not just the next day or week, but months, years. If I can survive winter, I can survive spring and summer. If I can survive this year, I can survive next year. The infected don't seem to be dying off or disappearing. If anything, they're a permanent feature of the landscape now. This is my life now. This shelter, this canyon, this daily routine of survival. There's no going back to the world before. That world is dead. Accepting that brings a strange kind of peace. Day 226. A group of infected moved through the canyon today, the largest concentration I've seen since the horde back around day 50. I counted over 200 of them, moving north in a loose stream that took hours to pass. Where are they going? What draws them north? I don't understand the pattern. I watched them through my binoculars, trying to see if there were any differences between them, any variations in behavior. Most moved with that same shambling gait, that same purposeless swaying. But a few moved differently, faster, more direct, more focused. Is the infection changing? Are they evolving somehow, learning? One of them stopped directly below my shelter and looked up. I froze, even though I knew it couldn't see me from that angle. It stood there for maybe 5 minutes, just standing, looking up at the cliff face. Then it opened its mouth and screamed. The sound was horrible, not a moan like they usually make, but a genuine scream, loud and sustained and somehow intentional. Other infected in the group stopped and turned toward the sound. For a moment, I thought they were going to start climbing, that they'd somehow figured out I was up here. But then the screamer wandered off, following the group north, and the moment passed. I sat there shaking for an hour after they left. Day 234. Spring is trying to arrive. I can see it in small signs, buds on the trees down in the canyon, the ice on the creek breaking up and flowing away, birds returning from wherever they spent the winter. Grip has brought a mate. I'm calling her Grasp because I need to call her something, and it seems fitting. The 2 ravens have been building a nest on a ledge about 30 feet above my shelter, carrying twigs and grass and bits of my tarp that blew away during storms. I'm going to be a raven uncle, I guess. Or at least a neighbor. The warming weather has brought back the smell of rot from below. All the frozen bodies are thawing again, and the stench is remarkable. I've tied cloth over my face constantly now, trying to filter out the smell. It also means the infected are more active. I'm seeing dozens every day wandering through the canyon. The concentration hasn't decreased. If anything, it's increased. They're congregating here for some reason, drawn by something I can't identify. Day 241. I saw an infected child today. The first child I've seen since this started. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, wearing what remained of a pink jacket and small sneakers. She was missing one arm, torn off at the shoulder, the wound long since rotted. She walked along the creek bank below me, stumbling over rocks, falling, getting up, continuing north with the others. I put the binoculars down and cried. I haven't cried since the early days, since I was still processing what had happened. But seeing that little girl, infected and wandering and lost, broke something in me. She was someone's daughter. Someone loved her, cared for her, protected her for 7 years. And then the infection took her, turned her into this wandering thing. I'm glad I stayed at my shelter. I'm glad I didn't go with Patterson and Alex in Hollis. Because if I'd gone, I might have had to shoot infected children at some point, and I don't think I could do that. Even now, even knowing what they are, I don't think I could. Day 249. Something is wrong with Grip. It showed up this morning moving strangely, one wing held at an odd angle. It landed on the railing but couldn't seem to balance properly, kept tilting to one side. I approached slowly, talking softly, and Grip didn't fly away. Up close, I could see the problem. Its left wing had been injured somehow, maybe in a fight with another bird or collision with something. The wing was bent wrong, feathers damaged. I've never tried to handle Grip before. We've had our routine, our transaction of food for companionship, but always at a distance. But I couldn't leave it like this. I wrapped Grip gently in a cloth, feeling its rapid heartbeat through the fabric, feeling its struggle weakly. I examined the wing as carefully as I could with my limited knowledge. It didn't seem broken, just badly sprained or dislocated. I don't know if ravens can heal from wing injuries. I don't know if there's anything I can do to help. But I made a small enclosure using wire I had in my supplies, put Grip inside with water and fish, and positioned it in a sheltered corner of my platform. Grip spent the rest of the day huddled in the corner, looking miserable. Grasp, the mate, showed up and made distressed sounds from the railing. I tossed her fish, but she didn't eat it. She just kept making those sounds, and I got the sense I was being accused of kidnapping. I'm trying to help, I told her, but I don't think she believed me. Day 222. Grip is still alive, still in the enclosure. It's eating a little, drinking water. The wing looks slightly better, or maybe I'm just hoping it does. Grasp visits multiple times a day, calling from the railing. Sometimes she brings Grip food, dead mice, insects, once a small snake. I let her drop these offerings into the enclosure. I've become a wildlife rehabilitator in addition to my other roles: survivor, scavenger, fisherman, and now bird doctor. Day 248. I had to release Grip. The wing wasn't healing. If anything, it was getting worse, and keeping a wild raven confined was stressing it too much. I opened the enclosure this morning, and Grip hopped out, stretched its good wing, and made its clicking sound. It couldn't fly properly, managed a kind of fluttering hop that got it to the railing but not much farther. Grasp immediately flew down and began preening Grip, making soft sounds. The two of them huddled together on the railing, and I left them alone. A raven that can't fly properly won't survive long. Between predators and the inability to escape danger, Grip's odds aren't good. But at least it's free. At least it's with its mate. I gave them extra fish and watched them from a distance. Day 265. Against all odds, Grip is surviving. It stays close to the shelter, using the platform and the nearby ledges as its territory. Grasp hunts and brings food. They've figured out a system. The injured wing is healing slowly. Grip can fly now, but only for short distances, and only with obvious effort. It'll never be a strong flyer again, but it's enough. I'm relieved, more than I should be about a bird. Day 273. Summer is here. The canyon is green. The temperature during the day sometimes hits 80 degrees. I've stripped down to just pants and a shirt, and I'm still sweating. The heat has accelerated the decomposition of the bodies below. The smell is beyond description. I've wrapped cloth soaked in wild mint around my face constantly, and it barely helps. The infected keep coming through, drawn by something, following some pattern. I've stopped counting them. There are always some in view, always the sound of moaning drifting up from below. My garden is doing better this year. I've got beans growing, some squash, the herbs have survived. It's not much, but it supplements my diet of fish and foraged plants. I celebrated my birthday yesterday, or at least I think it was my birthday. I've lost track of the exact dates, marking time by seasons rather than days. But I'm roughly sure I'm 28 now. 28 years old and living on a platform under a cliff, eating fish and talking to ravens. Not how I imagined my late 20s going. Day 281. Something remarkable happened today. I was fishing when I heard a noise from the cliff face above me, not the usual sound of rocks falling or infected tumbling over, but a deliberate sound, rope hitting rock. Someone was rappelling down the cliff. I grabbed my rifle and aimed it at the sound, waiting. A figure descended into view, moving in controlled jumps down the rock face. The person saw me, froze, then slowly raised one hand in a peaceful gesture while holding the rope with the other. "Don't shoot," a woman's voice called. "I'm human, not infected. I saw your shelter from the rim. I'm just looking for a safe place to rest." I kept the rifle trained on her while I studied her through the scope. She looked to be in her 30s, wearing climbing gear and a backpack with a rifle of her own strapped to her pack. Her movements were controlled and competent. Most importantly, her eyes were clear and focused. "How do I know you're not infected?" I called back. "Ask me questions," she said. "Infected can't answer questions. They can't have a conversation." Good point. I lowered the rifle slightly but kept it ready. "What's 7 times 8? 56, she answered immediately. "What's the capital of France?" "Paris," I said. "When did World War II end?" 1945, she said. "Can I come down? This rope position is uncomfortable." I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "Slowly. Keep your hands visible." She rappelled down the remaining distance and landed on my platform with practiced ease. Up close, I could see she was lean and weathered, with short dark hair and scars on her hands and arms. She looked like she'd been surviving hard. "I'm Kiana," she said, unclipping from her rope. "I've been moving through the canyon systems for about 3 months now, mapping routes, looking for other survivors." "Jordan," I said. "I've been here 8 months. This is my shelter." She looked around at my setup, the platform, the garden, the hanging supplies, the water collection system. "This is impressive, really impressive. You built all this yourself?" "Didn't have much choice," I said. "It was this or die." "Fair enough." She unslung her pack and set it down carefully. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I've got my own supplies. I'm just looking for information, for connections between survivor groups. There's a settlement forming about 100 miles northwest of here, 50, 60 people. They're trying to build something sustainable." "I heard about a settlement near Montana," I said. "Met some people heading that direction months ago." "Probably the same place," Kiana said. "Word's spreading. People are starting to connect, share information. The infected are persistent, but they're not organized. Humans can outlast them if we work together." She spent the next hour telling me about what she'd seen in her travels, scattered survivor groups, some doing well, others barely hanging on. Stories of settlements that had failed and ones that were thriving. Routes through the wilderness that were relatively safe and routes to avoid. She had maps, actual hand-drawn maps showing the locations of survivors and infected concentrations. "You should come to the settlement," she said finally. "What you've built here shows real skill. We need people who can think creatively, solve problems." I looked around at my shelter, my home for 8 months. "I don't know," I said. "This has worked for me. Leaving feels risky." "Staying alone is risky too," Kiana said gently. "Eventually, something will happen. Equipment will fail, you'll get injured, supplies will run out. Having a community means backup, means people who can help." She stayed the night, slept on the other side of the platform, respectfully distant, her rifle within reach, but not pointed at me. We talked through the evening about survival strategies, about what we'd seen, about the world before. It was strange having another person here. Strange, but not bad. I'd forgotten what conversation felt like, what it was like to share thoughts and ideas with someone who could respond. In the morning, she prepared to climb back up to the rim. Before she left, she drew a rough map showing the route to the settlement and gave it to me. "If you change your mind," she said, "follow this. There are waypoints marked, safe places to camp, water sources, areas to avoid. The settlement's called Haven. Just tell them Kiana sent you." She climbed up and disappeared over the rim, and I was alone again with grip and grasp, and the sound of infected moaning below. I still have the map. I haven't decided what to do with it. Day 293. I've been thinking about Kiana's visit constantly, about Haven, about community, about the possibility of something more than just survival. This shelter has served me well. But she's right. It's not sustainable forever. Eventually, something will break that I can't fix, or I'll get sick or injured beyond my ability to treat, or the infected will find a way up, or a storm will destroy the platform. Living alone is a gamble on nothing going wrong. And in this new world, things go wrong all the time. I've started preparing for a possible journey, sorting through my supplies, deciding what's essential and what can be left behind, testing my climbing gear, making sure everything's in good condition, building up my strength with extra food rations. I don't know if I'll actually go, but I'm preparing for the possibility. Day 301. A pack of infected wolves attacked the canyon today. I heard them before I saw them, howling that sounded wrong, broken, interrupted by gurgling and snarling. Then, they came around the southern bend, 6 wolves moving in a loose pack. They looked like nightmares. Patches of fur missing, exposed muscle and bone visible through rotted skin, eyes filmed over white. They moved with the same purposeless aggression as infected humans, snapping at each other, at the air, at nothing. They caught scent of an infected human wandering along the creek and attacked it in a frenzy. The human went down under their assault, and I watched through my binoculars as they tore it apart. Then, they turned on each other. The pack fragmented into individual animals attacking anything that moved. They wounded each other badly, but the wounds didn't slow them down. The infection had removed whatever instincts of self-preservation they once had. One of the wolves tried to climb the cliff face below my shelter. It made it maybe 10 feet up before falling. Tried again, fell again. It repeated this maybe a dozen times before wandering off. The infected wolves moved through the canyon and disappeared to the north, leaving behind the torn remains of the infected human and a trail of blood. If the infection spreads to predators, to pack animals that hunt cooperatively, this changes everything. Infected humans are dangerous but predictable. Infected wolves, bears, mountain lions, they'd bring a whole different set of problems. I need to be more careful, need to be ready for threats from angles I haven't considered. Day 310. I made my decision. I'm leaving. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Within the week. I spent last night sitting on the edge of my platform, watching the stars and thinking about everything that's happened. 8 months in this shelter, 8 months of survival against impossible odds. I've proven I can do it, proven I can adapt and endure. But Kiana was right. This isn't living, it's just surviving. And there's a difference. Haven might be a disaster, might be dangerous, might be full of people I can't trust, but it might also be a chance at something better, a chance at community, at shared resources and knowledge, at not being alone. I owe it to myself to find out. Day 314, I've packed everything I can carry. 2 backpacks, one on my back, one on my front, loaded with food, water purification tablets, medical supplies, ammunition, tools, and a few personal items. My rifle is slung across my back. I'm wearing layers that I can add or remove depending on the temperature. I've dismantled most of the shelter, salvaging rope and materials that I might need on the journey. What I can't carry, I'm leaving for whoever might find this place next. The platform itself will stay. It's too much work to dismantle completely, and maybe someone else will need it someday. I left a note carved into the rock face. Shelter built by Jordan. Survived here 310 days, heading to Haven Settlement Northwest. If you need this place, use it. Stay safe. Grip and Grasp watch me work, making soft clicking sounds. They've claimed the platform as their own territory now, and I'm glad. At least someone will be using it. I climbed down for the last time at dawn, my packs loaded, my hands familiar with every hold on this cliff face I've climbed hundreds of times. At the bottom, I looked back up at the platform that had been my home, my fortress, my salvation. Then, I started walking north, following Kiana's map, heading toward Haven and whatever future might exist there. Day 315, first day of travel. I made it maybe 12 miles before I had to stop and camp. My body's not used to this kind of extended hiking anymore, not used to carrying this much weight. I'm camped in a small cave, well hidden, with a clear view of the approaches. I saw infected today, 4 of them wandering through the forest, but I avoided them easily, staying mobile, staying quiet. I miss my shelter already, miss the security of it, the routine, the familiarity. But I'm committed now. Forward is the only direction that makes sense. Day 322. I've been traveling for a week, and I'm getting into the rhythm of it. Walk from dawn until mid-afternoon, find a secure spot to camp, rest and recover, move on at first light. I've seen other survivors, brief glimpses, distant figures who disappear before I can make contact. I'm not the only one moving through this wilderness, not the only one searching for something better. The infected are everywhere, but they're scattered enough that I can avoid most of them. I've had to kill 3, 1 that surprised me in a narrow canyon, 2 that were blocking a pass I needed to cross. Each time, I used my knife instead of my rifle, saving ammunition and staying quiet. According to Kiana's map, I'm about halfway to Haven. Another week of travel if conditions stay good. Day 329. I found one of the waypoints Kiana marked on the map, a small cave system with supplies stashed inside. Canned food, water, ammunition, medical supplies. There was a logbook where travelers had signed in, left messages. I read through the entries. Dozens of people had passed through here over the past few months, all heading toward Haven. Some entries were hopeful, talking about building a new society. Others were desperate, talking about being pursued by infected or running low on supplies. One entry stood out. Patterson, Alex, and Hollis passed through here. Made it this far at least, still heading north, still believing. Day 198 of the New World. The 3 people I'd met at my canyon. They'd made it this far. I hoped they'd made it all the way to Haven, hoped they'd found what they were looking for. I added my own entry. Jordan, Day 329, from the cliff shelter in Blackwater Canyon, following the map to Haven. Still alive, still moving forward. I restocked my supplies from the cache and moved on. Day 336, I saw Haven today. I crested a ridge in the late afternoon and looked down into a valley, and there it was, a collection of buildings surrounded by walls made from vehicles and lumber and shipping containers. I could see people moving around inside, smoke rising from chimneys, gardens planted in organized rows. Civilization. Real, functioning human civilization. I sat on that ridge for an hour, just watching, trying to process what I was seeing. After so long alone, after so many months of survival mode, seeing organized human activity felt surreal. Finally, I started down toward the valley. As I got closer, I could see the walls more clearly, reinforced with sandbags and barbed wire, with watchtowers at regular intervals. Guards patrolled the perimeter, armed and alert. When I got within about 100 yards, a voice called out, "Stop right there. State your business." I stopped, raised my hands to show they were empty. "I'm looking for Haven," I called back. "Kiana sent me. She gave me a map." There was a pause, some discussion I couldn't hear. Then, "Kiana's been back for 2 weeks. She mentioned you. Said you were living in some kind of cliff shelter." "That was me," I said. "Jordan, I decided to take her advice. Walk forward slowly," the voice instructed. "Keep your hands visible. Someone will meet you at the gate." I walked forward, my heart pounding, toward the gate in the wall. It swung open as I approached, and a woman stepped out, older, gray-haired, carrying a rifle but holding it pointed down. "Welcome to Haven," she said. "I'm Sarah. I'm one of the council members here. If you're really who you say you are, and if you're not infected, we can offer you shelter, food, and a place in our community." "I'm not infected," I said, "and I could really use all of those things." She smiled, a genuine warm smile that I hadn't seen on anyone's face in almost a year. "Then come on in. Let's get you processed, get you fed, and you can tell us about this cliff shelter of yours. We're always interested in creative survival strategies." I walked through the gate into Haven, and I felt something I hadn't felt since the world ended. Hope. Inside the walls, life continued. Children played in a supervised area. Adults worked in gardens, at cooking stations, building and repairing structures. Solar panels powered lights and equipment. There was organization, structure, purpose. Sarah led me to a processing area where they checked me for bites, asked me questions to verify I was thinking clearly, cataloged the supplies I'd brought. Then they took me to a communal dining hall where I ate real food, vegetables, bread, even meat from chickens they were raising inside the compound. I sat at a table surrounded by other survivors, listening to conversations about crop rotation and defense strategies, and teaching children and all the mundane details of trying to rebuild society. It was overwhelming and wonderful and strange. That night, they gave me a bed in a shared bunkhouse, an actual bed with a mattress and blankets. I lay there in the dark, listening to other people breathing, other people existing in the same space, and I couldn't sleep for hours despite my exhaustion. I'd survived alone for 310 days. I'd built a shelter in impossible circumstances. I'd adapted and endured and overcome. But now I was here, and this was the real test, learning to live with people again, learning to be part of something larger than just my own survival. Day 340. I've been in Haven for 4 days, and I'm still adjusting. They put me to work. Everyone contributes here, no exceptions. I'm helping with construction, using my experience building the cliff shelter to reinforce walls and improve defenses. They're impressed with some of my improvised engineering solutions, and I'm learning from their organized approach. I've met maybe 50 people so far, out of the roughly 80 who live here. Most are survivors from the surrounding region, but some came from farther away. Cities, suburbs, other states. Everyone has a story about how they survived, what they lost, how they found Haven. Patterson, Alex, and Hollis are here. They made it. They welcomed me warmly when they saw me, said they'd wondered if I'd ever change my mind about the cliff. We sat up late one night comparing our experiences, filling in the gaps of the past months. Kiana is here too. She's one of the scouts, mapping the region and making contact with other survivor groups. She smiled when she saw me. "Knew you'd come around," she said. "There's structure here, rules, a governing council that makes decisions about resources and security. There are conflicts and disagreements, personality clashes and power struggles. It's not perfect, not paradise, but it's functional, it's surviving, and it's growing. The infected are still out there. We see them from the walls occasionally, wandering past the valley. The guards shoot any that come too close. There have been attacks, waves of infected drawn by the noise and activity of a living settlement. But the walls hold, the defenders are trained, and Haven endures." Day 355. I've been here for 19 days, and I'm starting to feel like part of the community rather than a visitor. They've asked me to teach a class on wilderness survival and improvised shelter construction. I'm using my experience from the cliff to show people alternative strategies for defense and survival. Some of them are skeptical. Why plan for being alone when we have the settlement? But others understand that redundancy matters, that having multiple skills and strategies increases everyone's odds. I sleep better now, though I still sometimes wake up reaching for my rifle, expecting to be on my platform with the void below me. The adjustment is ongoing. I've started to make friends, real friends, not just survival partnerships. People I trust, people I eat meals with and share stories with and plan for the future with. The future. That's a concept I'd stopped thinking about during my time at the cliff. There. The future was just tomorrow, just the next meal, the next storm, the next threat. Here, people talk about next year, about 5 years. From now, about rebuilding. It's intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Day 365, 1 year. 1 full year since the world ended, since Millbrook fell, since I fled into the wilderness. Haven held a memorial service today. We gathered in the central square, all 83 of us, because 3 more survivors have arrived since I got here. And we shared stories about the people we'd lost. Names and faces and memories spoken aloud so they wouldn't be forgotten. I talked about Mrs. Patterson and her butterscotch candies, about Gary Cole trying to defend a town that was already lost, about my mother in Denver, whose fate I'll probably never know. Others shared their own losses, husbands, wives, children, parents, friends. The catalog of grief was overwhelming, but so was the fact that we were here, together, remembering, that we'd survived to tell these stories. After the memorial, there was music. Someone had a guitar, someone else had a harmonica, and they played songs from before while we sat around a bonfire and tried to remember what normal felt like. I thought about my cliff shelter, about Grip and Grasp raising their chicks on that platform. I thought about the choice I'd made to leave, to seek out other people, to risk this. I still don't know if it was the right choice. Maybe there isn't a right choice anymore, just different paths through an impossible situation. But I'm here. I'm alive. I'm part of something larger than myself. And for now, on this anniversary of the end of the world, that's enough. Day 372, I went on my first scouting mission today with Kiana and 2 others, a man named Devin and a woman named Mai. We traveled north, following reports of a possible survivor group in the mountains. It felt strange to be back in the wilderness, moving through the forest with a pack and a rifle. But this time I wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. We covered each other, shared the work, made decisions together. We didn't find the reported survivors, but we did find evidence they'd been there, a campsite, maybe a week old, with signs of hasty departure. Whether they moved on or got taken by infected, we couldn't tell. We also found infected, a group of about 20 wandering through a valley. We observed them from a ridge, noting their movements and numbers, adding the information to Haven's maps. The infected don't seem to be decreasing in numbers. If anything, they might be increasing as they spread and turn more people and animals. But they also don't seem to be getting smarter or more organized. They're a persistent threat, but a manageable one with the right precautions. We returned to Haven at sunset, reported our findings to the council, and I fell into bed exhausted. Tomorrow I'm back on construction duty, helping build an extension to the wall that will increase Haven's perimeter and allow for more gardens. This is my life now. Scouting, building, defending, planning, contributing to something. That might last. That might grow into a real settlement, maybe even the seed of a new civilization. It's hard work. It's dangerous. It's uncertain. But it's not just survival anymore. It's living. And after everything I've been through, after 372 days of fighting to stay alive, that feels like a victory. The world ended a year ago, but we're still here. Haven is still here. We're building something in the ruins, creating something new from the fragments of what was lost. Maybe that's all any of us can do. Survive, adapt, and try to build something worth preserving for whatever future might come. I think about my cliff shelter sometimes. Wonder if other travelers have found it, if it's helping someone else survive the way it helped me. I think about the view from that platform, the silence of the canyon, the rhythm of my solitary days. I don't regret leaving, but I'm glad I built it, glad I proved to myself that I could survive on my own, that I had the skills and determination to endure. That knowledge, that confidence is something I've brought with me to Haven. It's part of what I contribute, part of what makes me valuable to this community. We're survivors, all of us here. We've each got our own stories of how we made it this far, our own scars and strengths. Together, we might have a chance at something more than just making it through another day. Together, we might actually have a future. And that's worth fighting for.